I said a little earlier, often when it comes to moments in our calendar, I suppose, like the budget speech, we get reaction from big business, from Labour, from other political parties, and often you wonder whether the discussion or criticism is about the good of the country or even posturing and political point scoring. So what we've done today is, well, we've invited politicians to come and talk to us, but perhaps wearing different hats, because the two individuals we're about to speak to are the ones who are going to look after the money, or at least see where it goes. We've invited the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Mmusi Maimane, the leader, of course, of Build One South Africa, as well as the chairperson of SCOPA, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and leader of Rise Mzansi, to join us. Both gentlemen are on the line. It's always a pleasure to chat to you both. Let me get your responses. I'll start with you, Mmusi Maimane. Yesterday, your overall take on the budget speech.
We're making difficult decisions, and one of my biggest challenges about yesterday's was, in some ways, in the midst of that, a lack of big policy decisions. The second dilemma is that we have a growth problem as a country, and this is self-evidenced by the fact that now we have to tax citizens if we're going to balance books. Thirdly, I think there's obviously a big conversation about what we do around social relief distress grant, and my argument as we sit here today is that I thought yesterday was a missed opportunity for us to frame what expenditure we'd like to cut, and more crucially, what country do we want to live in from a growth point of view? And so what I'll be looking out for in the next number of weeks and months as we interrogate the budget and work through it is to ensure that there's better efficiency, is to figure out how a better debt management strategy looks like, and ultimately say to all South Africa, all our focus must be on expenditure that brings growth. We fail at that, I think we'll look at a budget blowout in the medium term.
Songezo Zibi, as a Xhosa speaker, you'll appreciate the saying, Lala kusha ndukuthebe. For the middle class and other entry-level workers, bracket creep is going to be a real challenge here, because although, of course, VAT didn't go up by 2%, life is still going to be tricky.
Good morning, Bongani. Yes, and I will simplify that. So once everyone complained about the proposed 2 percentage point increase in VAT, the National Treasury had to look elsewhere for areas where to find money. One of the things they've done is to not effect that adjustment for inflation for the lower income brackets, which they normally do year in, year out. What they've done is they've said to people who earn, I think, below 520,000 rand, we will not make that plan for you this year. We are going to keep the money instead of giving it to you, which means, in effect, people in that lower income bracket are going to be paying more tax this year. In short, we have chosen to tax the teachers, the nurses, and so on, instead of finding revenue elsewhere, because it is unpopular.
I've said we've invited both of you this morning because ultimately, not just as leaders of political parties, but in terms of your roles in Parliament, you are going to be looking after the money. Mmusi Maimane, could you explain to us what your role as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations will mean in terms of the T's and C's of this budget?
So in essence, the budget is a bill. It's the Division of Revenue bill, and it's the Appropriations bill. Both of those come to our committee, and effectively we then interrogate and look at all the expenditure framework, whether it aligns with whether the government's objectives are correct. We then can consult. The Money Bills Act gives power to the committees to be able to make recommendations whether to accept, reject, or amend the budget. And historically, all of this used to be ceremonial because you had a simple majority or you had a big majority. Now what can happen is that Parliament itself can assert its position to say, we would like to reject this component, amend that component. And our committee sits in the center of being able to go, if there's a department that's impacted, you can mediate between departments. If there's a recommendation that Parliament needs to make, that needs to make to the Minister of Finance for them to be able to give back input. And ultimately, as I've said to you, that one of the things we'll be looking hard at is to go on the expenditure side, so that as the Constitution enjoins us to be able to free up money for service delivery, where are some of those expenditures that are wasteful that we can begin to interrogate and then say, how do we adjust the budget going forward? Lastly, our committee also has the very crucial role of engaging the public, because no law in this country must be passed without public consultation. So we will be spending days in communities hearing from South Africans as to how the budget impacts them. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a tax conversation. It's about whether the hospital is using its money, or the school is paying its teachers well, or it's being built properly, or water is flowing in municipalities. So that public consultation work is crucial, so that the final report that then goes back to Parliament to vote on, because only Parliament effectively passes the budget, because that committee, our committee, will make that submission to Parliament. Parliament will then vote on that, and then it then is given to the National Council of Provinces, and then it's sent back to the President for signature. And only then is it the law of the country, or only then is it the budget, so that expenditure can begin from there.
All right, Mmusi Maimane, I'm going to let you go because I understand you have another commitment. That's the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations. This is, of course, Parliament's financial cluster. Also the leader of Build One SA. Still on the line, though, is Songezo Zibi, who's the Scopa chair. In a sense, what Mmusi is saying is part of what makes this moment in South Africa exciting, because the ANC no longer has that majority. All of these things cannot be taken as a foregone conclusion. There's going to be debate. There's going to be convincing each other. And ultimately, of course, hopefully for the good of South Africa.
Yes, that is a hope, Bongani. I think what is important, though, is that all political actors behave with maturity, and they approach this very important task with seriousness and in a balanced manner, so that we don't engage in political posturing or using this process as a hostage in order to secure political concessions that have got nothing to do with the management of the economy. The public must look out for that, because already I can see there is a great possibility that people will try and extract concessions which have nothing to do with the budget itself. And I think politically those people must be punished.
Is there, a worst case scenario here where if this government cannot pass the budget, and at least in terms of what they've said, the DA have indicated they won't support it as it stands, neither will the EFF, I suspect Mkhonto Wesizwe wouldn't do so either. Is there a worst case scenario where if this government couldn't pass this budget, it would collapse?
Yeah, there is a possibility that in a few months, when you're supposed to put a vote through Parliament, it does not have the support of all the political parties. However, there are other things that can be done. For instance, the Finance Minister may table further amendments to the budget. In other words, everything that is already agreed upon from previous budget parliamentary resolutions is put in one appropriation bill and is allowed to continue, and you separate the issues that are contentious in the budget, put them in another bill so that you can take more time to resolve those issues, maybe in October during the medium term budget policy statement, and then you resolve them further on from there. So there are procedural ways in which you can avoid bringing the country and the economy to a standstill.
You and I know, of course, every other day there's a headline about corruption or wastage or mismanagement of public funds in South Africa. Your committee particularly is tasked with keeping an eye on the money. Are you confident that we've now built sufficient guardrails within the system to at least minimize some of that?
No, the guardrails are not sufficient, but one of the most important things that need to happen, one is a change in political culture in various institutions from municipal level all the way up, and secondly, putting systems in place to eliminate waste. I cannot emphasize the importance of systems, because we rely a lot of the time on the moral depth of the people that we place in important positions. That's important, but what you need is systems that are going to prevent waste and corruption from happening. The Treasury has committed to me several times this year already that they will present to our committee in detail, areas in which the government should be spending money better, all the way down to municipal level, and Parliament must do its work to hold those institutions, ministers, mayors, NECs, premiers, accountable for the manner in which they spend money, even if there is no corruption, Bongani, because that's what people forget. You may cross all the T's and dot all the I's and still take a problematic decision in terms of spending.
Even if it was well-intentioned. Appreciate your time as always. Songezo Zibi is the chairperson of SCOPA.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.